Going to be creating a illustration of a deer inside of this diamond shapes, utilizing what we've learned so far in Illustrator. Obviously, if you're watching this video, you missed class or need to catch up, so you're using this to complete what you missed in class. So with that said, I would just say just try to watch carefully where my mouse goes. Unfortunately, I don't have any kind of highlighting thing like some tutorials. I'll try to do this every once in a while so you can see where I'm at. I would just definitely encourage you to maybe break things down into steps. So maybe watch something, hit pause, complete it, and then start back up the video. It also might help if you're on your computer to maybe run the video on either your phone or your tablet so that you can have it on one screen kind of off to your side, and then you'll have your computer free to use. Or you can always use the 3 swipe of your fingers on your trackpad to switch between windows or between desktops, on your Mac. So in other words, you could put your browser with the video here and then flip back over and have Illustrator in your other desktop, which to do the desktops, you just swipe 3 fingers up, and then as you can see, you're able to switch between those. So just a little tidbit there. Okay, so this is what we're going to be completing. I'm just going to kind of show you what it's going to look like finished, and then we'll set up our document. We're doing this deer, and it's a relatively simple kind of geometric shaped deer illustration with a little bit of nice subtle gradients to give some lighting effect and obviously bring in some color variations. This is a very, very simple mood board that I kind of created this off of. Obviously, most of the time with creative projects, we want to have a lot more extensive mood board, but I just thought this was a good example to let you show, and I did reference some other deer images, but I'm just showing this one. I wanted to look at a real deer and then interpret it into more of a geometric shape, so I did that. This is where I got inspiration for my colors, and this is kind of some rough inspiration for color and illustrative style that I wanted to reference. So as you can see, this has some pretty straightforward vector shapes with some subtle gradients, and that's kind of what I replicated here. So again, what a mood board is for, just to reiterate, is to gain inspiration. You know, I didn't do any copying here. There's not any blatant copying. Probably the closest thing that I did was, you know, the colors are pretty straightforward from this real photo of a sunset, which I think is really cool. I love using nature to especially grab colors from. So then over here I sketched out my line work, and then I brought it into Illustrator. It's off to the side here since it's completed. I got my colors. I got my colors also pre-established, and I did that kind of ahead of time before I even started coloring, and put them in my swatches over here. Basically what we're going to do, we're going to lay out the line work first, and then we're going to go back and color, and it's took us 2 class periods to do that. Line work 1 class, color in detail the next. Okay, so let's go ahead and set up our document. Whoops, wrong. I'm going to get into Illustrator. Okay, I'm going to go to New or Command N. Of course, we want to always practice key commands as much as we can in both the Mac and our applications. I want to go ahead and just make this, obviously it is a very vertical illustration, so I'm going to make it an 8x10 though. So if it's something we like, we can maybe put in an 8x10 frame. Don't have to worry about resolution in Illustrator, right? Because it is vector, which means it's resolution independent. We don't need to worry about that while we're in Illustrator. I'm going to go ahead and keep it in CMYK, and I think that should be good. I'm going to go ahead and click Create. So there's 2 things I want to import into here to get things started. Actually, just one thing at this point. We're just going to import our sketch. So you can place sketches into bitmaps or, you know, JPEGs into Illustrator. This is probably about the only time you would ever need to do that, is if you're tracing something or using it as a template. So in this case, I'm using my own sketch. Again, Illustrator is not for manipulating anything but vector art. So bringing in something that is sorry, my windows are a mess. Anything that isn't vector really doesn't make much sense, except for in this case. So I'm going to open up my folder here. I have my sketch file. You can do it a couple different ways. You can drag it in, or you can go through the actual program. So I think I'm going to go through the actual program here. What I mean is go up to File and down to Place. And this allows me to navigate through the Finder. I'm going to go into my Deer Diamond folder I've already established, find my sketch, hit Place, and then it allows me to click and drop it into here. So what that's doing, it's actually linked into this file. It's not embedded, so we have to keep track of this file as long as we need it, within a folder structure, but right now we're good to go. So I've put it in here. And then I was going to talk about colors, but I think we will wait until we actually get to that mode, and we'll import some saved out preset colors that I already have ahead of time for you, but we won't do that quite yet. So now what I'm starting to think, every time I start an illustration, I always just kind of look at it. Everything is about, in the beginning here when you're building, order, okay? I like to do things in phases. I like to make sure I go ahead and set things up so that they're in a smart order that they need to be in. Obviously the background and the diamond need to be behind the deer. So what I usually do is I go ahead and I open up my layers and I say, I pre-establish the kind of main root layers that I want to have to break down each part of the illustration. But before we do that, what we want to do is we have this layer that has the sketch in it, right? We want to lock that up and even dial down the transparency a little bit, just so that we can have it there to trace, but we don't want it to be too prominent. I used to just simply go over to the transparency, dial it down, and then hit lock, but then I discovered if you right click, if you go up to the menu and go down to template, it's kind of an automated way to do that for you. If you don't like the amount that it kind of dialed down the transparency, you could obviously go back and do it manual, but this seems pretty good for me. And then if I want, I can go ahead and name that sketch. Again, we want it locked up so we don't accidentally bump it around. All right, let's go ahead and establish 5 layers for now. We might need more. And I'm going to start looking at this. So basically what we're going to be doing, this whole background with the mountains and the water and then some land and the sun is all going to be something that we'll draw and then place inside what's called a clipping mask that only allows that to show inside of this diamond shape. So with that, I'll talk about that a lot more, but let's go ahead and set up background. Let's just call it background diamond. And what we may end up having is a couple subfolders in there, one for the actual elements of the background and then one for the clipping mask. The next one, or the next series of layers that are going to be on top of that, obviously, is going to be how I want to break down the deer. So the neck is probably going to be, we want it to be on the lower layer. His head, I think I'd like his face on a separate layer, and then the ears and antlers in a separate layer. So with that said, let's go ahead and put neck, neck, head, face. Okay, I need a couple more, so I'm just going to hit this create new layer button down here. Actually, I just need one more. Ears, and antlers. Okay, and so the ears and antlers, I actually, now that I'm looking at that, I probably want that to fall behind the head. That way I can just kind of draw those and they will kind of tuck behind the head. Same with the neck, it needs to be behind the head, so that's why I have it down here. And obviously the face needs to be on top of everything. Okay, so then we got our background. All right, just to show you real quick, but we'll talk about it more. When you want to make sub-layers inside of a layer, that is down here, create new sub-layer. So we might have some instances where we're going to be doing that inside of here eventually. In a couple spots, I don't see it happening too much. But as you can imagine, with really super detailed illustrations, you really want to utilize this organization because the more that you utilize layers, the more detailed the illustration gets, the more easily you can organize and isolate things and select things and lock things so that you don't accidentally change things when you're drawing other things. I hope you get the picture. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. With this illustration, as you can see, and I have some pretty straight lines already established here, it is very symmetrical, okay? We're going to use a lot of, we're going to draw this with a lot of geometric shapes and then manipulating the points and paths to get what we want so that everything stays nice and even on both sides. So lots of shapes, lots of manipulation, and lots of reflecting, which I'll talk about here in a minute. But let's go ahead and start with our background. What we're going to do here in this first phase is get all the basic shapes of everything down, simply just drawing with a black stroke with no fill. So I'm going to go ahead and hit none with the fills on the forefront here, right? So I can hit none and I'm going to get rid of that. It has no color. Black stroke, no fill. But before that, I want to get some guidelines down so that I can snap things into place and kind of know how I'm aligning things and get that reflective symmetry down with ease. If you don't have your ruler activated, go ahead and hit Command R. That'll bring up the ruler. With guidelines, what you can do is you click inside of here, drag down, and you can pull out some both horizontal and vertical guidelines. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, so now I have a great place to start for getting things lined up, especially starting with this diamond, which I believe I will draw first here. Okay, to do the diamond, I'm going to go ahead and use I think I'll just go ahead and make a square. Let's see here, what do I want to do? There's a couple different ways we could do that. I think I'm going to start with a square. And go ahead, and if you want to start from the center to keep things nice and even, this is just a good practice. If you click and hold down and then hold down Option and Shift, you can actually drag out from the center, okay? So obviously this isn't a diamond yet, but I'm just gonna drag it out till at least these top corners match out to my sketch of the diamond, okay? This is a square, obviously not a diamond. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna hit V for my selection tool, hover over this corner here, click, drag until, and I'm going to hold shift. If I hit shift right here, I'm holding down my click, I'm hitting shift, it's locking into it. What that does is it kind of makes it so that it locks into 45-degree increments. I just want to lock it so it's, went to the next 45-degree angle, or at 315 degrees. That way I have a perfect diamond shape, right? It's perfect, but it's not the shape we want it to be quite yet. So at this point, if I hit V for the selection tool, actually what I'm going to do is use the direct select tool. Or no, I'm sorry, the selection tool. I'm going to hold down shift, size it up again. Oops, actually from the center, so Option Shift from the center. And get it up to size. And here's a good time for me to note that the sketch is not perfect. So at this point, we're refining our drawing, so we are going to match it up as best we can, but we want to stay with symmetry that we know is real, and that's what's lining up with our guidelines that we already haven't set in place. So it's perfectly in the middle here. I can always utilize zoom if you need to get things perfect. Now I'm going to use the direct select tool. Now that I got these 2 points in about the place I want them to, I'm going to use the direct select tool, key command A, always quick to do key commands, and I can either use my arrow keys and hold down shift and wait until that gets all the way down there, or if I'm impatient, I can click and drag. If I hold down shift, it's going to lock it so that it stays, right here locked into my line. So I'm going to drag it down to here. Actually, I'm just going to drag it till it's matching up with at least one of the angles here. Now, click, drag, hold down shift. See, even if I get off a little bit, when I hit shift here, it locks back into place onto my guidelines so that I'm making sure everything stays nice and even. Okay, so there's my diamond. At this point, I know everything's symmetrical, so if I did want to make any adjustments, I would just want to make sure I do it the same amount on both ends. I get really meticulous about my details here. So for example, if I wanted to make this come out, I would probably use the arrow key and go 1, 2, 3, and then make sure I go over here and go 1, 2, 3. These are just like little fine adjustments, and obviously I'm very particular and I like things to stay nice and symmetrical. Okay, so I got the diamond. At this point, we are going to start working on just getting in these other shapes. Okay, here's where it's a little confusing, but kind of try to just follow along with me here. I'm just going to draw this background and let things kind of drag off outside of the diamond, not worrying about it, because eventually I'm going to make a copy of this diamond shape to do a clipping mask to where anything I draw on the outside of the diamond is not going to show up. But for now, I don't need to worry about too much, okay? So I know, if we go back to our finished one, that I have a color background up here, a color background down here, we've got the water running through, we've got different color mountains. So this is where you kind of learn to work, thinking ahead of knowing what you're building. So I just know that I'm going to want an object on the lower half of this diamond that I'll be able to color in a certain color. And then I also want another one up here. Start up here and just match it up. So this will be the orange. I'll eventually color this one with orange for the sky. I'll eventually color this one in with purple. I'm looking at this knowing the order of things. So if you notice, I'm starting in the back. I know that this is the bottommost objects, the purple and the orange are the very, very background, right? And I'm going to try to build going forward. I know it seems like a lot to think about, but at least for me, that's just something I've gotten used to doing. And if I screw up the order, obviously I can always change up that order, and I'll know something's going wrong or out of order once I start coloring. So now next would be the mountains, these big ones back here. So I'm going to just use the pen tool for those. And again, I'm going to start on the outside of the diamond, knowing that the diamond's going to eventually hide everything that's outside of it. So click right here, match it up here, down here, up here, boom. I'm holding down shift so it stays straight. Don't really care what it looks like on the outside of the diamond. That's one mountain. I'm going to draw another one starting over here, boom, boom. And I'm going ahead and making sure that the bottom of the mountains kind of stay on this line here. In all reality, I could and probably will bring something like the water and this background up to front to make sure it cuts off perfectly there, but I'm just drawing it straight across there. So I got the two shapes for the mountains, about where I want them. I might adjust them later after I color them. I'm going to go ahead and run a rectangle across here for just the very base of the water. Now the squiggly lines for the water, I don't think we're going to worry about that till we get to the actual color phase. I'm just kind of getting the base shapes down here, and we're going to do some of the detail adding later on when we're in the color phase. Same with the sun. For now, I'm just going to get the actual sun itself. So I'm going to hold down shift because I want to constrain my proportions, click and drag, and get it drawn on there. I want to, again, make sure I'm using my guideline to make sure it's sitting right there on that center vertical line. Okay, we got the background in place, so I think we're in good shape. I know it looks a little confusing because we're seeing lines that are eventually going to go away. They're going to eventually get colored in, so it doesn't even matter. I like to build this way. I just like to get my line work down first, then think about color. To kind of help you at least make sure you understand what we've done so far. So back over here, and I need to save, so I just noticed that. Always want to make sure we're saving. Save as, or Command-Shift S. Deer diamond. Alright, got that saved. Alright, so we have the preset shapes, but to go over to my finished one and hopefully to help you kind of see what I'm doing, I have these shapes back in here. So as you can see, I have this selected. This is the orange background shape. You can only see what's inside of the diamond because of having established a clipping mask. It's all in this layer right here, the diamond background like we established on the other file. Same with the purple background down here. If I select the river, if I get the right thing. Again, hidden. All these are those same kind of shapes I thought through and just got the very base ones established. So that's what we're doing here. We haven't done the clipping mask, and we probably won't until we start coloring. So hopefully that helps you understand. And if things start to feel, if you have a hard time looking past some and things start feeling a little hairy, that's another reason layers are awesome. So I have all the basic shapes in my background. If I feel a little bothered by having those in my way right now as I start to begin to think about drawing out the deer, I can hide it. That's what these awesome eyeballs are for. We can make them go away. Just hide them for now. So let's get started on the deer. We're going to start with his neck. What I'm going to do, it's going to seem a little tedious at first, but I want everything on this deer to be symmetrical. So in order for this side of his neck to look exactly like this side of his neck, I'm probably on some of these shapes, at least starting with the neck, I'm only going to draw half of it and then perfectly reflect a copy of it and combine those together with the Pathfinder. Let me pull up the Pathfinder. Anytime we don't have a particular thing that we need, oh, it is over here. Let's see. Oops, it was hiding from me. It was down here. Whoops, we're going to use the Pathfinder to combine those shapes together. So this is one shape I am going to just draw somewhat organically with the pen tool rather than using a shape. So I'm going to start up here, starting kind of behind the head since I know the neck's going to fall behind the head in the order of things. Click to establish that anchor point, and then click and drag because I would like it to have this curve. Rubber band preview shows me that the next establishment will have a curve. If I don't want that, just click back onto that point to kind of reset things. Click down on this point. I have my guidelines in place, so I know exactly where to put things to keep things symmetrical and centered. And then because I'm going to, this is a little bit confusing to explain, but because I'm going to have a reflected piece of this, I don't want to risk those not coming together perfectly, so I'm going to come outside of the midline just a little bit so that when I make that other one, they overlap for sure and combine well. I'm going to come up. I don't care what the top of this looks like too much because, again, it's as long as it's just up behind the head. So I have the one side of his neck. I'm going to make sure I like that shape because I want to perfectly reflect it, and I don't really want to have to try to perfectly symmetrically manipulate two of them after they've already been reflected. I would just like it to be established ahead of time. So now I'm ready to make that, like I said, reflected copy. There's a couple of different ways to do that. I've established a key command for it. You can do custom key commands. I can't really get into that now, but basically it just activates this dialog box, which is found under either Object, Transform, Reflect, brings this up, or we have a Reflect tool over here that's nested under the Rotate tool, key command W, so you can establish that. And what you can do is simply just, since this is always up here, just double click on this, and this same dialog box will come up, okay? And what I like is it gives you a preview, lets you pick horizontal, vertical. We want vertical. But in this case, I want to keep the one I already had right in place. I just want a copy of it. So it keeps my original one, gives me a copy. It's perfectly on the same horizontal plane. I just need to scoot it over here. To do that evenly, click, hold down Shift. Shift locks it in to be perfectly parallel, or shifting over on the exact same horizontal plane, and lock it in place. Again, my concern right now is keeping things nice and even with my guidelines. Not necessarily matching up to the sketch. The sketch is imperfect. What I'm building is a refinement. We want to go with that. Now I can hold down Shift, select the other one, go ahead and hit Combine, or I'm sorry, Unite in the Pathfinder, and that's going to make that one nice shape. I always like to zoom in and see if there's any kind of weird off overlap. That you might have a little blip or something that you can always kind of even out here. I know I'm kind of breaking some rules here a little bit, but sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes I hit it perfect. Either way, as long as it looks nice and even, is hitting that line, we should be good to go. Perfect. We got the neck. Only thing that I want to do for now, until we get to the color mode for the neck, is this cool little piece here. Basically is how I'm going to be dividing the neck up into these kind of weird geometric shaped shadow representations in the neck. I just want to establish that curved line, that symmetrical curved line, at least for right now, for doing that. So to do that, I'm going to just use the pen tool and draw it here, and I'll be ready for it when I actually start to copy and paste and make some copies to make those shapes. So I clicked once, I'm going to click and drag, and then zoom in here because I want to get right on this line, and click and drag to get this curve down here. Remember, you can always go back with the direct select tool, key command A, click on your points and paths, and manipulate things to get the curves just the way you want. Okay. And I'm going to want to reflect that. So I want a copy of this one. I'm going to double click on my reflect tool, tell it I want a copy, take that copy over, hold down Shift while clicking and dragging it, zoom in, get it perfectly lined up, and I do want this to be one continuous line. This was just the easiest way for me to get a perfectly reflected line. At this point now, I'm going to take the direct select tool, key command A, click off of everything just to make sure I don't have anything else selected I don't want selected. Click and drag around these 2 points so that I only have these 2 points of the line selected. See, the other ones are white. The only ones that are selected are the ends of these 2 lines. And what happens is I can now right click with my mouse and go to join. Now that line is connected together. Now those happen to be a little overlapped from each other, so that's why it's kind of doing this weird thing. I can kind of pull them away here. You can see they're connected now, connected to each other. So now I'm ready to use that. What I will eventually do is make a copy at the front of the neck shape, use this to divide the neck up into those 4 different segments. eventually when we're ready to color. I just wanted to have that line established ahead of time while I can still see my sketch underneath and while I'm establishing all the line work. All right, now we're moving on to the head shape. We are going to use a the polygon tool to kind of start and establish the deer's head here. Obviously, we're going to make a lot of manipulations. So starting here, my 2 cross points of my guide, I'm going to hold down Option and Shift and just drag that out until it's roughly at least meeting up to, you know, his jaw line down there. Actually, I think I will bring it up here till it's meeting at these top 2 points right here. Okay. At this point, I'm going to deselect it. And a lot of times what I do to deselect, you can either hit Command-Shift-A or you can just use your selection tool and click away. So these are things that's kind of easy for me to forget to explain what I'm doing to deselect and certain little minor things like that. I usually just have my selection tool and then click off so that I know that I'm starting fresh in selecting points or paths or whatever. Alright, so I want to use the direct select tool, key Command A. I'm going to go ahead and move these 2 points together. Holding down Shift, I'm clicking these 2 points. Now I'm holding down Shift and using my arrow keys. Arrow keys are always your friend if you want to move things in careful increments. And move these 2 points up here. I think I want to now select these 2 points. So anytime the points are white, that means they're not selected. When they are dark, to be the color of the vector path line and the color of the layer that it's on, then you know you have those points selected. Move this down, but as I'm moving this down, it's getting a little too thick, and I think I also would like my deer's kind of jawline here to have a little bit of a curve to it. So with that said, I think first what I'll do is one at a time, scoot these 2 points in. However many times I hit the arrow key in, I'm going to do on both sides so it stays symmetrical. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, now I'm ready to give it a little bit of a curve. If you have a shape that has straight lines and you at that point want to establish a curve somewhere, all you need to do is select the point that you want to do that with and convert the selected anchor point to smooth or curve. Or you can use the anchor point tool down here, which also converts it. Shift-C is the key command for that. So I'll do it with each way so you can see an example of both. Now doing this, I'm going to have to eyeball things a little bit to make sure these are exactly the same. I'm going to hold down Option and click and drag this handlebar back up here. Alright, for this one, I'm going to select that point. I'm going to go up to, just by clicking the Convert Selected Anchor Point to Smooth. See what happens there. It goes ahead and it just assumes, okay, here, now the point's curved. But luckily I can manipulate it the way I want to. So holding down Option allows me to independently drag these handlebars. And sometimes it's important to be able to independently drag the handlebars. If I don't hold down Option, this is what happens. The teeter-totter effect, right? Which would be fine and all, but then it's starting to pop out this other end out in a way that I may not want it. So I like to hold down Option sometimes and isolate those handlebars. Okay, I got the main shape of his head down that I want. Now we have his, I guess, muzzle area. So this shape that you're seeing for his mouth, I'm going to keep that on the head layer. Actually, before we do that, I want to establish one more thing about the head. I have his head kind of dipping down here, so I need to add an anchor point to this while I still have it selected. So I'm going to hit P for pen tool. Anytime you hover over a path while you have the pen tool, it's going to give you a plus sign or a minus sign if you're over top an already existing point. That way you could remove it. I don't want to remove that. I want to add one, so I'm going to click right here, convert back over to my direct select tool, select it in the middle here, and drag it down to where I see it to match up with the sketch. We are going to use that rounded corner feature here on some of these spots eventually as well, but I'm going to get all the pieces down first. And then obviously I use my guideline there. Alright, now to the muzzle area. So this main shape here, I'm just going to make it another polygon. Okay, for this one, I think I'm just going to kind of guess about where the middle is, hold down Option Shift, drag it out till it matches roughly. excuse me, and then obviously manipulate it a little bit until I'm happy with it. I think I'll bring these 2 points down. I'm going to do a little less explaining, hopefully, hoping that you're kind of catching on. Drag these down a little bit. I might shorten this up a little bit. The bottom of his muzzle, I'm going to add an anchor point kind of like I did the top of the head. Bring it up a little. The angle of these, I'd kind of like to bring out just a little bit. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And I'm eventually going to be, if you look at my finished one over here, dividing these into 2 pieces. You can see I kind of did some manipulations here and rounded it off. But we will do that later. Again, we're just kind of getting some key shapes down here. But before I do get too far, I do want to round some things off. So especially his muzzle here, I think it could use to, be softened up with some rounded ends. I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to widen that out a little bit. So to round these out, you can either isolate independent points on a path with the direct select tool, and then you will get these little circular things right here. And what these are, if you click and drag in on these, you'll notice what it's doing. It's rounding the shapes. It's rounding that corner. And what's really cool is you can always come back and manipulate and change those. Unless you mess with the points that it establishes when it does that, it will give you this control right here. It'll go away once you move either one of these 2 paths at that point. But I'm going to do it there. If you know you want them all to be about the same, then you can go ahead and just select them all. So I selected 4 of these here, and it'll do them all. So that's kind of a time saver. Instead of doing them, 1 at a time or 2 at a time, you can do however many at a time, and it's going to round any corner that you have selected as long as when you drag on 1 of them. That's good for his muzzle. I'm going to go up here to the deer's head. I'm going to round this in, these 2 in. Direct select tool, click on both of these, round these in, soften that up a little bit. And I'm just eyeballing it. I'm not worrying about them all being the exact same. Excuse me. Alright, so I think for his head, that is all the base shapes we're going to do, and next we're going to move on to the face. The face. For the face, we have this funny, I don't know. I don't even know how to describe this shape, so we're going to have to improvise a little bit. But again, because I want it to be symmetrical, I'm going to draw, one side, same manner that we did the neck, and then reflect over that piece here. We're definitely going to utilize our rounded corner feature here as well. To establish this shape, though, I'm going to go the route of using the pen tool, starting with, this is one way to build things, draw things out. Starting with just kind of straight lines, and then again utilizing that rounding tool. So I'm just going to start here, click, click. I know this seems weird, but I'm going to square this off knowing that I can use the rounding tool. Here and then back here. Keep it pretty simple. All right. Okay, so it's nice and geometrical. The only thing, geometrical, is that a word? I might want to pull this out so that it goes past his head a little bit. We might have to adjust that. I don't know. All right, now rounded feature. Using the direct select tool, let's just start with, I'm going to round out both of these, basically to where it comes to a complete kind of circle. Okay, that looks pretty good. It might be sticking out a little bit further than I want. This one's a nice gradual angle, right? So when I pull out this curve, it's going to be nice. It's another way to make a nice curve too, instead of drawing it with a pen tool. And then this one, as far as getting this curve, I'm going to wait until I reflect and unite those with the Pathfinder before I do that one. So I'm pretty happy with this. I'd say I might want to shorten this up a little bit. So I'm going to grab these 3 points. Yours might have came out differently. A little trick here though. There's actually 2 points here. Sometimes when you do these automated things like the rounded corners, little funny things will happen, like 2 points somewhere, and then you can't get them. So you just have to click and drag around both of those first with the direct select tool, then hold down shift and grab the others. So I might just shorten this up a little bit. I just don't quite like how long it got out there. All right, pretty good. I like that shape. I'm happy with it. There it is. Okay, going to reflect it now. Double click my reflect tool. brings up the dialog box. I want to copy. Vertical is good. Copy. Got it. Hitting V, so I have the regular selection tool. Click, drag, hold down Shift. This is an example of why I kind of do that thing where I pop out in the midline for both of those, because see how they're not quite touching. That's okay though. I'll just go ahead and bump these in, let them overlap a little bit, just so I know when I go to unite them, there's no kind of weird gapping that happens. Just when we're going to reference this and this to make sure they're both nice and perfectly symmetrical and centered on my vertical guideline. One way to do that, especially when you have two pieces like that, select both of them. It's going to put a bounding box around both of them. I can use that as a reference in this midpoint on the bounding box to know whether it's nice and centered. So then I can use my arrow keys to kind of nudge things around. Now I'm going to, now I'm going to unite those. So clicking on unite. Now it's nice, one solid shape. That is perfectly centered. Only thing I can do, or want to do now, is round this top part. So I use the direct select tool, click on it, grab the little rounding controller, and pull it up to whatever level of rounding I want there. So this is making that, in case you're a little lost, it's making this shape, or this, well, it's making this entire shape. Obviously I've broken it down in this completed version to get some detail or whatever, but it's this entire shape right here for the face. Okay, cool. So we got that established. That's on the face. Next thing, let's go for something easy for now. And let's do one of the eyes. I'm just going to use the ellipse tool. I really want to get these eyes perfect. A deer's eye is pretty important part to their feature. So it might be one of those things where, yeah, you already drew it out, but you might want to go back to your reference and say, okay, how do I want to interpret this in the style that I'm going for here? So yeah, I'm just gonna start with like an oval, but kind of bring the curve up on the top a little bit. Gets very close to the side of the head, almost to the point of breaking past the shape of the head. So let's go ahead and go for that. Oops, wrong tool. I'm gonna go over to my shape layer, click and hold down, and go back to ellipse tool. Go ahead and just draw an ellipse. I know it's straight across, but then I will use the bounding box to click and rotate it out. And again, I'm probably not going to settle just for what the ellipse tool itself made. I'm probably going to manipulate a little bit. As I said, I want, maybe a little bit more curve up at the top. Maybe bring it to a little bit more of a sharper point here down to this part of the eye. I'm still a little concerned with how much this protrudes out, so we might fix that later. I'm just going to do one eye for now. Sometimes on this illustration I might do some more detail on one side of the thing before I reflect it, just that way I'm not having to do double the work, especially if it's a piece like this where I'm not going to be uniting them together like we did this shape. Let's go down to the nose. It's going to be treated the same way that this was and the neck was, where we make one half and then reflect it. I'm just going to go all pen tool here. Click and drag. Again, most of the time when you're drawing with the pen tool, you just kind of want to establish minimal amounts of points as possible. You can always click back on the points to reset things. Usually you're establishing your points in the path on the apex and on the valley of any given curve, if that makes any sense. Click back to reset. Right, that's the nose. I think I'm going to bring it in here a little bit. Right, I'm happy with that. I'm going to reflect that. Double click on the reflect tool, make a copy, click, drag, hold down shift, get it lined up, zoom in. Oop, that's a little off. Looks pretty good. Let's see what it looks like down here. Both of these could use to come down, but I'll fix it after they're united. Holding down shift, selecting both with the regular selection tool, Pathfinder, unite. Yeah, I'm not too happy with that, so we'll go ahead and fix that up a little bit. I just kind of want that to round out there. I can even remove the points if I'd like. just hit the P for pen tool. It gives me the minus, and I can just kind of even things back out. Sometimes you get a perfect shape down there when you unite things, sometimes you don't. Okay, we got his face down. Let's move on to the ears and the antlers. I failed to go to the face layer before I started drawing our face elements. That's okay. It gives me an opportunity to show you how to move things around in layers if you do something like that. This happens to me quite a bit. You get ahead of yourself, and it's part of one of the temptations to draw everything on one layer, which I highly recommend you not doing. But if you do it, just back up and say, oh, okay, I need to get those moved to the right layer. And I think this also works out because I think I do want the muzzle to be on the face layer too, where I originally had thought I wanted it on the head layer. So I'm going to click with my selection tool, key command V, hold down shift, click on all the elements that I want to be on the face layer. So at this point it's the muzzle, the nose, the eye, and then this face element right here. And then you'll see what's cool about layers. You see everything you have selected because it is highlighted. I expanded this layer so that I could see them. I sometimes do, I could probably grab these and click and drag them up into the face layer just like this, but what I like to do just to keep things organized is temporarily group them. So with them all selected, if I hit Command G, that groups them together. Now I see they're a group. Okay, grouping is awesome. Now I can click and drag that group until I've highlighted the face layer, and I'll put it inside of there. So now that's into there. If I don't want that grouped anymore, all I simply have to do is grab that group. I can either do it by clicking on the artboard itself or by clicking on this little circle over here and hit Command Shift G. Usually when you add Shift to many key commands, it is kind of a reversal of whatever it was, the original. So Command G for group, Command Shift G ungroups. So grouping is another way to organize things within your Illustrator document, which is awesome. But I want it ungrouped for now because I still have some work to do and some needing to move things around. Now we can move on to the antlers and the ears. The ears are going to be pretty straightforward. It's another one kind of like the eye where I'm just going to draw one on one side for now. Same with the antlers. And then until we color and add some of that detail, I'm not going to bother reflecting until I have all that done. So we're just going to kind of draw on one side for now. All right, so click on the ear and antler. We'll start with this kind of basic shape of the ear. Again, because this is already ordered in the right order, it falls behind the head layer. I can start drawing behind the head here. I know I can see it now because everything's empty with no fill, but it's just kind of a nice way to ensure that you're drawing things in the right order. But basically I'm just going to use the pen tool. I love the pen tool. It's always my friend. I could use a shape and manipulate it, but this is easy enough for me. So let me start back over. I didn't really explain my drawing method here. Click and establish a point. Click and drag because I just see a subtle curve there. Click back to reset. I think on this one I'm going to click and drag. And then really just clicking again seems to give me the finishing part of that curve that I want. So there's my ear. Okay. We are going to do, like you'll see that on my finished one, there's two parts to the ear. I think we'll just wait and do that in the color phase. So I'm just going to keep it as one just main piece for now. The antlers. Okay, we're going to explore a whole different method, and a method I think is easier, and plus it gives me opportunity to introduce another really awesome tool in Illustrator for you, and that's the width tool. So what we're going to do, instead of drawing, each side of these antlers and trying to get that perfect thick to thin, because antlers naturally kind of have this where it's thicker closer to his head and thin on the ends and branches out, kind of like a tree. We are going to draw one line right down the middle and get the actual shape of the curve of the line of the antler established first for all of them, and then come back with the width tool, which is an awesome tool, and get that line weight variation for each one of the antlers. And again, we're only going to focus on one side of the antlers, and then we're going to convert those lines into shapes. Okay, so let's experiment with a different tool. Instead of using the pen tool, we are going to use the pencil tool. So the pencil tool is Illustrator's kind of free-form drawing tool, and again, we're still just drawing with that black stroke. It works pretty well. What I like to do is I double click on it, and a lot of the tools, if you double click on them, usually a couple things will happen, but one is that some kind of options will come up. For the pencil tool specifically, I like this fidelity slider to be all the way over on smooth. And basically what that does is it makes things smoother for you. So if you are a little shaky as you're clicking and dragging and drawing, it kind of smooths things out for you a little bit, which is kind of nice. So starting with the main branch of the antler, basically what I'm going to do is just draw right down the middle. Okay, so I'm going to start out here, and just don't worry about getting it perfect, because know that we can always, manipulate those points and paths and get it the way we want. On the other little branch parts, try not to touch right directly on this current one, just because, but get as close as you can, just because it's going to make it hard to select. And sometimes it does that, where it, I don't know why it does that, but it takes over, it thinks you want to redraw this particular line. If that keeps happening to you, just deselect the one you just did, hit N for pencil tool, that's the key command, and draw your next one. Usually if you're far enough away from the last line that you drew, it shouldn't do that to you. Okay, I'm going to draw each one of these. I'm not really touching right to the line because they're going to end up getting close and branching off of each other once we thicken them up with the width tool. Alright, so I got those all established. Before I go to use the width tool, I'm just going to make sure I really like the flow of each one of these and I like the placement. So I'm just using a combination of the regular selection tool and the direct select tool and getting those the way I want them. I can hit the pen tool and hit minus or plus to add or remove points. This one's pretty good. The only thing I don't like, what I don't like about the pencil tool is as it's drawing, it's just kind of randomly placing points and paths based on the curves you're making. A general rule of thumb with any illustration in vector form or in Illustrator is minimal amount of points usually means cleaner and crisper and easier to manipulate line work. And the pen tool kind of just adds more than I would if I was drawing it manually with the pen tool. The pencil tool adds more points than the pen tool, sorry. Because when you're drawing with the pen tool, you're establishing exactly where there's points and paths, where while you are drawing with the pencil tool, it just randomly places points as you do it, if that makes any sense. I think I was just really confusing there, so you can ignore that. Sometimes I ramble, but I just thought I'd talk while I'm finishing this up here. Alright, I want that shortened a little, maybe bring this in. Such a perfectionist. But attention to detail is what makes things great. I'm really, really super picky about my curves. And that's why I like to use the pen tool, because I get to establish exactly where they go. Okay, pretty good. So now I have those in place. So now we're going to play with the width tool, but before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and select all of these. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the stroke panel. Oops, I didn't mean to pull it out like that. And select all these again, and take the width up to the skinniest part of each antler. So these very tippy tops, right? Just to kind of at least get us in a similar place and have a little bit more meat to work with the width tool. So see what I'm doing here? This is the thickest I want the thinnest part of each one of these antlers to be, is right here. And then now all I have to do is worry about thickening up the thickest parts of the bases of all the branches, if that makes any sense. Alright, so starting with this main antler branch, I'm going to activate the width tool. The key command is Shift W. I'm sorry, not Command W, Shift W. And this is how it works. So as you kind of run, I'm not clicking, I'm just hovering my mouse over the line of the antler with the width tool activated. You can kind of see this little white line that kind of magnetically connects to the spine, I guess, of the path. What you can do at that point is click and drag. You can even do it on an endpoint and thicken a line up from that. That's what the width tool does. So when you click and drag, it thickens out the line on both ends, which is really, really cool. Let me do another one here just to show you. Click, drag, thickens up. on the ends of these, I kind of want to get on the very end. And if something like this happens where it's kind of poking off the end, we can still fix that. I'll show you here in a second. If for some reason you want to only grow out the thickness of the stroke on one side or the other, then you add the option key to the equation. So in this case, let me do another one. Let's say I only want to thicken it up on one side. Instead of just clicking and dragging, I'm going to hold down option, click and drag, and see how it only thickened up on one side. This one though, I think I want to do it on both sides. Okay, how about this one? This one, I'm only going to thicken it up on this side. So I'm holding down option and clicking and dragging on the side I want to thicken up. This one, same thing. If I was to click and drag on both sides, it might flare out too much on that outside part. So maybe at this point, I'll bring that one back in by holding down option. So not only can you just thicken it up on one side, you can bring another side back in a little bit. Here's what's cool about the width tool. I'll finish those up here in a second. Even though I've added this thickness, they're still just paths that I can still manipulate the kind of main path of. So I needed to pull that one in so it connected better. I can still manipulate the curves. So yeah, I'm going to keep using that to thicken the rest of these up the way I want them. Now to make the ends of the antlers a little bit more finished looking, I don't want them to just kind of be capped off at the end like this. Let me show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to use the width tool, bring it to an ultimate point. But what I don't like is that really, really super thinned out the antler, too thin than I want. So instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is establish I guess a width node right here, and then bring this to a point. That way I am saying, okay, you're only ever going to get this thin for majority of the antler to here. And you can actually click and move those around a little bit if you don't quite like how they're flowing. And then I'm going to bring it to a point. So let's do it to this one. This one, click and drag out to about where I had it to begin with. Again, this is just kind of establishing like a place that will make sure that this stays thick right here. Then I can bring this one to a point. Bring this out to here, bring to a point. You can always move it if you don't like how it's flowing. Bring it out, click drag, width tool. Awesome, awesome width tool. I can move this wherever I want. Now here's something funny that can happen if you're not used to it. Let's say you just kind of get a little squirrely and you start adding too many kind of width tool establishments here. That can happen, and then you start to get some real funkiness going on like this or that. You can, as long as you have the width tool activated, you can click and delete those. So I'm going to hit delete. You have to be careful though, because if you have the selection tool activated, you'll just delete that whole antler. But I have the width tool activated. I know because I can see over here on the toolbar. Delete, delete. Whoops, actually I want to keep that one. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to keep doing that to the rest of these then. One more. And then, yeah, sometimes it can get a little hairy with these overlap. If you're having trouble, you can't get in and either within or make the base of one of these wider. You can move them, you know, out of the way and do it and then put them back in place. So always keep in mind if things get a little hard to work with, you can do that. There's your antlers. So at this point, that's cool. These are still paths that have a stroke, or they are strokes actually, in other words. Just for the sake of what I'm going to be doing in the future with some effects on these antlers for a little bit of lighting and needing to make copies of them, I want these to be shapes, just like my shapes down here that I've built. I want them to be closed shapes for now that just have a stroke on the outside and no fill on the inside. Right now they're just single lines, right, that I've used the width tool on. But I can convert them. So I'm going to select all of my antlers now by clicking and dragging with the selection tool and just clicking and dragging a rectangle around, only touching those. Whatever you touch it's going to select, but I only want the antlers. And then I'm going to go up to Object and Expand Appearance. And now you'll see what happened. They're still black, but now they are a black fill with no stroke. If I want to flip-flop that by doing the swap fill and stroke, I can just click on this little curved arrow thing, and now everything looks the way it did for the rest of what I've established. Again, this is how I work. I just like all my line work out there, even though I know some of it seems a little tedious. I may want to go in here and strategically unite some of these that I know I don't really need separate. Just depends on what you're going to do with those. Like the main antler and this one, I'm going to go ahead and unite those two. But some of these I might keep separate because I'm going to do a gradient effect, just a subtle lighting gradient effect on some of these. So as you can see, I kept this one separate and that one separate, but the rest of these I went ahead and united together. So I think this one can be united together. Yeah, just kind of planning things, plotting things out ahead of time. So now I have my ear and my antler. Again, I'm not going to reflect and put those over to here until I've done some more coloring and effects on those, because again, if I can only do it once and then reflect it all over to this side, that really saves me a lot of time. Coloring. So I went ahead, normally what I would do if we go back and look at my finished one, you know, I go through and pick out my colors ahead of time. And again, I heavily based my color scheme off of this photo, if you can't tell. So I go in and I match colors and break them down to kind of roughly decide, if I don't have a limitation, how many colors I want to utilize, and then knowing I'm probably going to use various shades and tones of each one of those a little bit, depending on how detailed I want to get. This one, you know, is not super duper detailed. So anyway, to save us time, to kind of simplify things for the process and for the sake of learning, we are just going to upload a color scheme folder that I saved out. So you can actually save out, if you establish a color folder like we see here, you can actually save those out, export them so that you can import them into other documents. So all we need to do is load up the one I already have. So I had provided that for you in the folder for the Deer Diamond project on the server that you have pulled down and been working from, where you same folder you got the sketch and everything. So I'm going to load that up. Now mine is just on my desktop on my computer, but obviously what you would do is you'll click on this library folder right here, go down to Other Library, and then you're going to get a Finder window to where you navigate to wherever the color file is. And it's just an AI swatch file. And again, it's in the folder for you guys, but you're not going to want to follow along with me because mine is simply on my desktop here. So here it is, Deer Diamond 1, or I think I had named it for you guys, Deer Diamond Color Swatch. Hit open, and it's a little annoying. It opens it up into another kind of separate swatch folder. I just like to go ahead and drag it over here so that I don't have to have extra things. So I drag it over here. It's a folder. Just to explain real quick, I don't know why, but one of my colors is a global color. When it has that little guy right there, that means it's a global color. That means if I have used that color in a document and then I double click on it here and change it, it'll change it within the document. So that is actually a really handy thing. But I'm not going to get into that too much here. The rest of them are not global colors. You can establish something to be a global color, I believe, by clicking on it, going up to the menu. I could be wrong. Let me see here. Spot color, blah, 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 blah. How do we change it to a global color? Spot color. Well, oh, right here. Yes, I'm sorry. All you have to do is double click on it. I'm making it too complicated. Double click on it. Check this global color box right here under swatch options. So, and if you click OK, oops, what happened? I didn't get it. There we go. Now it's got the little shape. So that way you know it's a global color. I believe this color might also be a Pantone color. That's why it has that dot as well. All right, so let's get started on coloring. We are going to, I believe, start with, what do we want to do here? I'm trying to decide. Why don't we start with a background, okay? So again, we're gonna look at our layers here. I have the deer right now visible. We had turned off, or maybe you follow along or didn't, the line work for the background that we had already drawn. I'm gonna turn that back on, and for now, I'm going to turn the deer off, okay? And what I'm going to do is just start with real basic colors, and I want my swatches out. So if you have your swatches kind of tethered where they just toggle on and off here from your panel bar, which is nice, Let's go ahead and pull that out so that we just kind of have it readily available and it stays there. Another thing I like to do, and if you want to pause and take the time to do, I like to go ahead and color in some boxes with all the colors I'm going to use off to the side here so that I have them handy and I can use the eyedropper. So if you want to do that, you're going to have to take the time to do that. I'm going to copy and paste this over just for the sake of time in the video here and paste it into a layer that's not locked. I had hid the deer background. I'm going to go ahead and just paste it in my background layer here. And I just like to have that up here. If you want to do that, you'll just have to go through, make a box, duplicate it. Obviously, I got mine nice and aligned, and then color it with each one of those colors to have it handy. The reason why this is nice is just because if you want to use the eyedropper sometimes. But either way. So looking at our finished piece, I'm going to go ahead and establish just the base colors here. I might have to come back here a few times and remember what all I did, so bear with me if I have to do that. But I know that under here, without the details, I have orange, purple, blue for the water, a pinkish mountain, and an orangish mountain, and then obviously they have these gradient effects that we'll get to eventually. So with that said, starting here, and again, I'm not coloring the rectangle. It's going to become just that clipping mask here in a bit, but I'm going to color these background shapes first. So I can do it one way or the other. I can go up here, I can make sure the forefront is selected, I can click on the orange, it's going to color that in, and then I need to get rid of the black stroke. You can see that's a little tedious, and that's why I kind of like to have these up here, because I'll show you how it's so much simpler. So for this one, I'm going to select it. Instead of doing that, I'm going to go ahead and just hit I for eyedropper, like the letter I for eyedropper, and then hit this up here. And that's a quick way to just reference that color and color things in, right? Another thing I'm going to do here real quick, I am going to make a screenshot of my deer and bring it in so that we can kind of just quickly be referencing it. And that screenshot should have went right to my desktop. I just want to have that in here so I don't have to be flipping back and forth and we can kind of know how we're coloring things. Okay. I got my purple base, I got my orange base. Now I'm going to go ahead and get the water base. Looks like I went with the very, very light blue. So I can use that. Again, I'm going to use my eyedropper here. Just getting the base colors in. Pink mountain. Oops, use the eyedropper. Orange mountain. Boom, I think. Oops, oh, now I'm going to trick myself and think I can actually move that. Yeah, the highlight gradient is what makes that actually show up and look better. We are going to have to do slice things up and do a trick behind the deer's head to make these separate, to make these two separate colors, but I'm going to wait till the deer is in there so I know exactly where I can get away with slicing that. Yeah, and it looks like we might be missing a spot too, but we might skip that detail. Go ahead and get my sun. It's just that white up here. And we're going to have to make these waves. I saved that detail for this step instead of drawing that in the line work phase. Let's go ahead and do that next. Let's go ahead and get our waves in. So I get to show you how to simply just make this waved shape. We're going to make it once, use an effect on a rectangle, and then duplicate it. So it's actually pretty simple. So I'm going to click on this because a lot of times when I know I want something to be drawn in the next step up in the layers, if I just select on that thing and then I deselect it and draw my next object, I know it's going to be right within that order of things in the layers most of the time. So I'm going to go up here. Before I start drawing, I'm going to go ahead and fill it with the color I know I'm going to use, so that's something you can do sometimes with that dark blue. I'm going to actually just use the rectangle tool, okay, and draw myself a really thin, very elongated rectangle right here to represent that bar of water. And again, we don't have to match things perfectly. We're just getting as close as possible here as far as the thickness. And then I'm going to go up to Effect, Distort and Transform, Zigzag, turn on the preview so I can see what it does. So we're starting off here with just a regular zigzag. I'm going to hit Smooth because I want it to have that wavy, water shape. And then here's the two kind of sliders you can mess with to get it, to the level that you want. Whoa, that's way too much. That's kind of a cool effect, but not really what I'm going for. Okay, I think that's good enough. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Anytime you use kind of an automated thing like this in Illustrator or an effect, it's going to kind of stay, lack of better explanation, it's going to kind of stay in this automated mode until you expand, what's called expand appearance, which we've already done once for the antlers. So it's usually a good idea to go ahead and do that, to go ahead and expand it. That way it becomes a fillable object that you have the freedom to do things with moving forward. So I'm going to go ahead and go up to Object, Expand Appearance. Now it's back to being a fillable shape. Now the edges of this got kind of funky too because it actually rippled the very much shorter end of this, the rectangle, but it's going to be out of view on the outside of the diamond shape, so I'm not worried about that too much. So now I'm just going to make a copy of it very quickly. I like to, when I just want to move something and make a copy, I like to just hold down Option. I get the double arrows. See those toggling back and forth? Hold down Option, click, drag, release my click first, and that gives me a nice copy. Okay? I'm going to offset these just a little bit. I want them to kind of be repeating at an angle here. And then there's my water. Okay? Let's see. We got all the base colors in. All we needed to do to get some of this stuff to pop and look dynamic is start adding gradients. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do the clipping mask first before we get into all that, so that maybe this is looking a little less confusing. And we should still be able to build things with ease even while it's in the clipping mask. Okay, so going over to the layers, we have our diamond shape. At this point, I'm on the background. We've made a few shapes here. Where am I? There's my diamond. It is at the very bottom. I actually, at this point, want to make sure it's at the very top of my layer because it's going to become my clipping mask. I'm going to drag it to the very top. Or another way I'll show you as a quick trick. I'll undo that. If you want an object that you have selected to pop to the very top of the layers, if you hold down Command-Shift, right bracket, the bracket keys are the two bracket keys next to your P key on your keyboard, it will pop to the very top when you're adding Shift. If you just hold Command and use the bracket keys, it moves the object, as you can see over there. Look over there on my layers. It's going up and down as I go back and forth on these bracket keys. Basically, the Command key turns the bracket keys kind of into an up and down arrow control. But when you add Shift to the equation, it's going to go to either the very top of the layer or the bottom. Top, bottom, top, but I want it at the top. So there's my diamond shape at the top. All right, this is all you need. For a clipping mask, this is the requirements. Everything that you want to be involved with the clipping mask has to be in its own layer. Checkpoint, we got that. Background layers like that. The shape that you want everything below it to go within has to be at the very top. We've done that. So over to our options panel then, and then we go to, I forgot one essential step. You click on the layer itself. So you can't be clicked inside elements inside the layer. You have to be clicked on the layer itself. Then over to the menu, make clipping mask. And there we go. We got our clipping mask of all our objects that we just built. It's looking a little kind of, unfinished right now because of no gradients, but we at least got the clipping mask in place. Okay, we are going to start working on some details, working on that gradient detail. So let me get back over here. Oh, you know what? One mistake that I made, I accidentally clipped out my reference because I had put it on that layer. It's over here. And because it is a part of the clipping mask, it got hidden. So I'm going to put it on its own layer so that I can make sure I can see it all the time. All right. All right, yeah, so we're adding in this gradient detail. I think I'll start with this mountain because obviously right now, until it gets some kind of gradient effect added to the top of it, it's not really showing. And I know this seems confusing, but I'm actually using this, this orange on purpose, and I'm going to use what's called blending modes inside the transparency panel. Where's my transparency panel? Sometimes things get closed on me or hidden. I'm getting a little disorganized here. So if this happens, I'm going to go ahead and show you. If you get kind of a little, your desk gets messy, you can always reset your workspaces. I've talked a little bit about making new custom ones or resetting default ones. I'm going to go ahead and reset my Lindsay's workspace so that I know where everything is. Okay, so here's my transparency panel. Okay, So what I do a lot of times when I'm building things is I make copies of objects exactly at the shape that they're at and to the front, perfectly to the top. And that's done by Command C, Command F. So instead of Command C, Command V, copy and paste, Command C, Command F is copy to front. And we've talked about that a little bit. But I also wanted to show you that there is another way to double up attributes to an element inside of one element. So if I want this mountain to not only have an orange fill, but also have a layer inside of it that's not an actual layer, if that makes any sense, that has this gradient, blended moded gradient on top of it. I can actually do it inside of what's called the appearance controls of an individual object. I don't utilize this a whole lot. I'm kind of old school and just like to do my whole copy to front way, but I want to go ahead and show you that, that you do have the possibility of doing that. So anytime you click on an element or an item that you have drawn inside of Illustrator, under the appearance panel, it will show you all the attributes that it currently has. At this point, this mountain only has one attribute, an orange, solid orange fill, right? I click on that fill. I actually have the ability to make a copy of it or make another fill, okay? So now I have two fills on top of each other. Both of those fills have the ability to be changed. At this point, what I want to do is I want to apply a gradient to this fill so that it's different. I'll open up my gradient palette. Again, it's one of those things where I kind of want to pull it out and have my colors available. And I'm going to do that with my swatch again. They went back into place since I reset my workspace. And I'm going to open up my appearances panel. Maybe I'll just go ahead and drag that out too. So I'm just going ahead and making my space messy again, but oh well. Okay, so appearance panel, top fill, I want to change to a gradient. I'm just going to go ahead and activate this gray gradient. I'm going to obviously change it. And what I'm going to change it to, and don't get too confused quite yet, is an orange gradient that gradates from orange to orange. And you're probably like, why would you do that? That doesn't make any sense. Well, you got these two gradient nodes that you have control of. This one I'm going to dial down to 0%, and nothing is really going to happen until I change the blending mode of this gradient. So I'm going to go over to, actually inside of the appearance panel, I have to go down here to opacity and change it to something else. In this case, I know I want it to be screen, and what that does is it makes that orange kind of work with the orange that's underneath of it, which the other fill, and causes it to make this nice, perfect, lighter shade for the mountain, which is a little bit more yellow. Then what I want to do, I want to use my gradient tool and just kind of direct it the way I want it. So that's what I did over here. I used that orange gradient right here, made it flow from that light yellow that is made with the screen of an orange on top of it down to a 0% of that. So it's grading from a screen of orange down to 0% of a screen of orange, making this lighter color. The screen blending mode is what causes it to look lighter. Just to kind of help you understand, there's a lot of different blending modes. These tend to make things lighter, these tend to make things darker. Basically, blending modes are just different ways of controlling how the colors work with each other as they're layered on top of each other. But again, I'm going to change it back to screen. So that's how I did that one. Okay. And I may use the appearance panel some for the rest of this project, or I may just do my old school copy to front. The benefit is, obviously things are kind of neat and clean and they're all in one object. Sometimes when you're building really big files with lots of layers, if you can get away with having one object have multiple effects instead of building up more and more vector objects, it will help with file size. But if you know it's going to be a smaller illustration that's not going to get really big in file size anyway, it doesn't really matter too much. So it's really just a preference. On this mountain, if I look at this one, it has a gradient going on as well. Now, I don't think we need to do a copy to front. I do see that things have gotten out of order, however. I do want the pink mountain on top of my orange-ish yellow mountain, so I'm going to hold Command and hit the right bracket key until it pops back out in front there. The other mountain is going to start to show through once I start playing around with some transparency and gradient here. So this one, I don't need any copies of it. I'm simply just going to make it a pink gradient mountain. So I like to just go ahead and take advantage, select the mountain, drag my colors that I want to have the gradient over, At this point, I just want to get rid of the orange. So I just drag it down and it'll go away. Now this one, another thing that you can do with gradient, and that why I like to have the swatch panel right next to the gradient panel, is I can click and drag and simply replace previous colors that were in there. So I drag a color over top of that gradient node right there, it's going to replace it. Then at that point, I want to activate my gradient tool, key command G, click, drag, and get that flowing in the direction I want. I want it to go from the concentration of pink starting at the top, flowing down to allowing the orange of the background and a little bit of hints of the other mountain in the background to show at the bottom. And that's getting that cool kind of gradient effect, transparent effect that I want. This project is very, very symmetrical and kind of lots of parallel lines. So I actually want these two mountains to mountainsides to be parallel with each other. So I'm going to adjust that a little bit. That was bugging me. Okay, as far as these other little parts of mountains, until we get the deer back in, and if we have time, we'll go back and change that, but I'm going to keep things simple for now. We have some more gradient stuff to do as well, though. So for the background, well, let's see, what do we want to do here? For the background, I have a little bit of a haze going on. This time, let's just do copy to front. So I've selected the orange background. I know that it's there because it's that square that's within the clipping mask. I'm going to hit copy to front, and it doesn't really seem like anything has happened, but if I go down here, I realize, I'll back up and do it again. Command Z. So I've got it selected, Command C, Command F. What that does, copy to front, makes a perfect copy of that exact element you have selected, placed it perfectly on top of the other one. This is my way of doing essentially the same thing I just did for the mountain, only I'm doing it where I'm making another object on top of it. I want this to be a gradient. I want it to be a hazy kind of white, maybe probably this pink, fading from 100% to 0% and then just letting it flow in. So I will go ahead and activate a gradient on there. Nothing's really showing because right now it's activated just this orange gradient. But I'm going to drag my pink into here and my pink into here. And it goes ahead and maintains that 100% and 0%. And then right now it's flowing from left to right. I want it to flow from top to bottom. So I'm going to activate the gradient tool just by hitting the G key on the keyboard, key command G, and telling it I want it to flow. And what's cool about the gradient, especially when you just kind of want a nice subtle flowing of it to come in, you don't have to start it right down inside of the actual object. You can kind of let it flow. So basically, and then you have this control right here too, which is the exact same control we're seeing over here, of where you can control how it flows, how much of it starts to come in. So it's kind of nice to have that slider right there. You can even actually change colors and change percentage and stuff like that by selecting those right here on the actual artboard. So there's the gradient for that effect. Oops, I don't know what that is. Okay, for the sun, it has this kind of haloing effect going on. This one I'm definitely going to do a Command C, Command B. That's the opposite of copy to front. It's copy to back. So I've made a copy to back. Now I would like this circle to grow out perfectly from the center of my current sun. So I'm going to hold down Option Shift, click and drag out, and just let a little bit of that show through. Now the way I have this one positioned, you can already see it's not matching, it's a little bit different than this one, and that's okay. I'm just going to leave it that way. I actually want it to have, and this is where you can use the eyedropper to kind of make things easier for yourself. So I could just pick this up, but I actually want it to be a radial gradient. So I'll just go ahead and click on the gradient panel over here, activate a gradient. I do need to change it from linear to radial. And I would like it to flow, let me zoom in here, I'd like it to flow from the inside out, which it is doing, so that's awesome. I'm going to hit G for gradient tool, that gives me the controls, and just have that pop out here a little bit. I would like it to go ahead and flow past the actual new circle line a little bit so that there's a little bit of defining edge of the gradient. So that's looking pretty good. I might make it a little bit bigger. And then, let's see, what do we want to do? For the next one, we're going to use a stroke to get this effect here. So again, copy to back, size it on up. It's got a fill. Believe it or not, you can actually flip-flop that and have a stroke on an object that has a gradient. Now, I have changed it from having a fill to a stroke. You can kind of see the pink gradient in there. Although we're not seeing anything yet because it's so small. So I'm going to bump up the size here of the stroke to maybe about 12 or so. And then hit G on the, I don't think we are able to actually use the gradient control for some reason when you have a gradient on a stroke, but if I deselect this, I kind of like the way that looks. It's a little bit different than my original, but I think that works for me. So I'm just going to keep it that way. So this object actually has a stroke with a gradient in it. Now we can control how it flows though by making sure, you know, again, it's on the forefront and playing with the flow here. So that is something that you can do, and it is still a radial gradient. If I want it to be a little bit stronger, I might pull this over here, but I want it to be pretty subtle, so I'm just going to keep it like this. Keep it over here on this side. Alright, so we got our sun, got our mountains. Now let's move on to just a couple little highlights inside of the water and the background area. Let's start with our background area. So, alright, for this one, let's go back to where we use the appearance panel to do it. Alright, so we got a fill. I'm going to click on it. We got the purple fill of this background. Make a new one. I'm going to tell it I want it to be a gradient. Because the last thing we did on this gradient panel for the sun was a radial gradient, we need to change it back to linear, but actually using that color is okay though. I might want to dial down the transparency a little bit, and again, I'm going to take advantage of the fact that I can use the gradient tool and allow it to just barely flow into there and be subtle. I don't want it to be an overwhelming gradient that usually doesn't look, you know, all that great. Another way to dial down, you know, anything is to not only, we could play with, you know, it being a blending mode, a screen, or we can actually dial down the percentage of the opacity of it. So that's something we can do as well. But again, I've done this all through the appearance panel here. So now this object has two fills. It has the pink, light pink gradient going from 100% of the light pink to 0%. And it's got the purple background fill as well. And we can see that all here in the appearance panel. And obviously, you can see there's controls down here to duplicate things and delete things. If for any reason there's an object you need to lose one of these fill attributes, you would just select it and drag it down to the trash can. Okay, the water has the same thing going on, so I'm going to hit duplicate, tell that top layer to be a gradient. I don't want it to be pink. I'm going to drag my really super duper light, actually it's just white, so have a little bit of a subtle white gradient going in. I'm going to replace both of these with that white. G for gradient tool, click and drag up. I think I want it to be flowing up a little bit. That's a little strong. I can either start down lower, or I could have dialed down the transparency, whichever I want to do. Okay, I think we got all of the details of our background put in. We're going to start on the deer now, and then we'll make a decision if we want to add in these other mountain details. Start coloring in our deer, and we're going to do it in the similar fashion that we did the background, where we just get the base colors in first, and then we'll build on those gradients eventually first. But with the deer, you'll notice a couple of things. One, he is mostly made up of these various tones of purple, with the exception of a few highlights with the gradients. But also that his neck's divided up into some sectionings that I haven't done quite yet, and so we're going to do a copy to front of the neck to get some duplicate versions of that. But before we get started, we just need to get that line work showing back up again. So first things first, let's lock our background layer because we have it in a good place and we don't want to accidentally bump it around. Then I'm going to click and drag up on all the eyeballs for the deer so that it shows back up. Why isn't it showing back up? Hello? There we go. It's a little glitch there. Sometimes glitchy things can happen, so I just toggled one on and off again and it showed up. Okay, so we got the neck. We've got this line that we're going to eventually use to divide things up. I think I'm going to go ahead and add another line right smack down the middle so that when I make a copy to front of the neck and I use the Pathfinder to get these extra shapes in that I want to color various things, I could just do it all together. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and just use the line segment tool. It's just a tool where you can draw a perfectly straight line You can use the pen tool too, but I am just going to go ahead and use that. So I'm just going to click and drag up, hold down shift. That ensures it's going to lock perfectly straight into place. Make sure I go all the way up because this line needs to go all the way through the next shape. Okay, so it's going out past here, and the next shape actually is right top of it's right here, even though it's confusing because it falls behind his head, and it's going way up past here. So that's perfect. I'm really just using this line as a cutting place. Okay. Before we do this though, I'm going to use this line and this line, like I said, to cut this neck shape into 4 different segments, but I don't want to do it to my main bottom piece here. Okay, I want to keep it in place. I'm going to do a copy to front. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and color it in with the base color at first. So we're going to color it in with this base purple. Again, I'm going to utilize my, no, I hid them. No, forget it. We're just going to use the swatch. They got cut off with the clipping mask of the background. I'm just going to color it in with this base color. So I'm going to click on that. Oh, whoops. You'll find out every once in a while you forget to pay attention to what's on the forefront, and you, instead of coloring in a fill, or you'll color in a stroke and vice versa. For this actually works out. That way it eliminates a step, and all I have to do is hit this swap fill and stroke. Now it's the fill with no stroke, and that's what I want. Okay, so now I can make that copy to front. So Command C, Command F. Now there's 2 of them perfectly stacked on top of each other. That top one is the one that I want, let me hide my guides real quick, to divide into these 4 sections so that I have those 4 pieces to color into different things, like my reference over there. So all I need to do is keep that selected, hold down Shift, select this piece and this piece. In the Pathfinder feature that we want to use, let me get my Pathfinder back up here. It seems to have gone away. Is going to be, it's called divide, okay? And basically everything that's, it takes lines that are overlapping any shape and cuts them into basically kind of like puzzle pieces, I guess. So I'm going to click on that. Doesn't seem like anything happened. When I select it, it all moves around as one chunk. That is because it cut it up, but it kept it in a group. So if I look at the layers here, you'll see the grouping is right here, okay? I want to ungroup it because I want to be able to delete some of these, recolor some of these, and so I need to be able to select them independently. So I'm going to grab it with the selection tool, Command-Shift-G. You'll see that group open up here over here in the layers, and now you'll see I'm now able to individually move these, which is exactly what I want. So basically, what's the simple part here? I want to keep this one that color. I want to keep this one that color, but I want these 2 to be the darkest color that I have. So, which is this really super dark purple, almost black. Make sure fill's on the forefront. Fill that in with that color. Okay. Don't worry about the face right now. Technically, I could delete these, but I'm going to go ahead and take advantage of keeping those there because eventually I'm going to turn them into a gradient. The gradients that you see here, but we're just going to do one thing at a time. We're going to go worry about the gradient quite yet. All right, next step, I'm going to start working on the face. I'm just going to start getting some things colored in here. So I know that this base part of his head, I'm going to color in with this purple. Remove the black stroke, the muzzle, same thing. Here's where things get kind of fun. You can utilize your eyedropper, do things a lot quicker, and knowing that you're picking up all the attributes that I want. I want the nose to be this black, so I can pick that up here. I want his little kind of face shape thing to be this lighter purple. I don't have any of that to use here. Did I use the wrong colors? Uh-oh. I think this is supposed to be the lighter purple. Oops, I apologize. We need to go back and change the head shape and these 2 shapes to actually this purple. Oop, sorry about that. That was totally my fault, and I got to remove some strokes here. We don't want any strokes, we just want the purples. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. I had picked the wrong color purple for my kind of base color. So we went back, let me back up here so you're not confused, because I know I could just kind of muck things up. So I need this to be the light purple, but I need to go back, change the head and these 2 shapes, bring the fill to the forefront, change it to this purple right here. Sorry for the confusion. Eye filled in with dark. Eye we're going to leave alone, kind of like the ear and the antlers, because we're going to add some details and we'll reflect those later. The ear, we'll go ahead and fill it in with the this purple, I believe. Yeah. Double check something here real quick. Yep, okay. We're in good shape here. Okay. All right, so next steps here is, oh, and antlers. Let's go ahead and get all those selected with the dark color too. Using the eyedropper, Command Shift, or not Command Shift I, just hit I for eyedropper. The letter I, pick that up. The ear has this kind of extra piece that we want to get in there. So what I like to do, I'm just going to hit Command C, Command F for copy to front. I like to use sometimes for just a quick way to revise things and make new shapes out of existing shapes. The blob eraser tool, it's right here. Or actually it's just the eraser tool. So Shift E is the key command. And so I did a copy to front, and basically I'm just going to it's one where you just kind of manually click and drag. And what it does is it can erase vector shapes. So I need to get this other kind of ear shape. It might get a little messy sometimes, but you can always go in and use the pen tool and delete some anchor points if it kind of made a little bit of a mess. But it's a nice quick way to kind of draw things, and I might even go in here with the direct select tool, select this little point, and round this out here too. So direct select tool, round that out. I'm just getting this other ear shape here. If I want it to be a little bit thinner, I can always manipulate it. But the benefit of doing that is it maintains that exact shape, because I borrowed it from the original shape of the ear. It maintains that top curve. I'll go ahead and make this part of the ear the lighter purple so that we can see the difference here. Okay, let's go back now and do some gradients so that we get some of this highlighting going on. And actually, oh, I'm sorry, we have one more thing to do. We got this kind of beveled thing going on at the base of the deer's neck that's just kind of a stylistic effect. I'm going to go ahead and borrow that from these two shapes down here. So I'll go ahead and click on those, hit copy to back. I'm going to hold down Shift and just hit the down arrow key and bump those down to about where I see my sketch line where I want them to sit. Okay, we're going to change the color of them. We're going to flip-flop them a little bit. So grab this one, hit I for eyedropper, click the dark color, I for eyedropper, opposite color. So that's how we got that kind of alternating pattern there. And then what I did was I used this direct select tool, grabbed this point of the object, this point of this object. And because I want them to both be the exact same rounding, I'm just going to pull in that rounding lever and bring those in to have that nice rounded effect. So that's how I got the base of the deer's neck there. Okay, now we're ready for gradient. For this piece here, because this was a copy on top of the base neck, I could just go ahead and convert this into a gradient. I do realize though that my base shape of the neck that I still have back there is the wrong color, so real quick I'm going to fix that. So what I did is I selected both, hit Shift to deselect this one, knowing I have the whole base neck shape, and then picked it back up to be that darker purple. I had accidentally made it this lighter purple. Okay, so now going up here, I'm going to activate a gradient. This gradient, I just wanted a little bit of a shadow to nothing. So basically we're going to do a dark shadow to 0% of the dark shadow, and what that's doing is allowing the under neck, that bottom neck piece, that main whole neck piece to show through. So click on my gradient, activate a gradient. I don't want it to just be the default black to white, so I'm going to drag my kind of purpley black that I have in my color scheme here, change one of the nodes to 0%, then hit G for gradient tool, click and drag, and allow it to flow from dark to light, kind of coming and peeking out there behind his neck. Okay? And then down here, same thing. I can use this piece now because I have my neck underneath. I will say I think I'm going to have to knock these two pieces of that new kind of shape all the way down to the bottom. So select both of these down here, these new pieces we made, hit Command Shift, left bracket key, that's going to knock it all the way to the bottom of the layers. Let me make sure it did the right thing. Yeah, there they are. They went all the way. Here's our neck layer. It went all the way to the bottom. That's because when I do this gradient, I don't want these two pieces to show through. I want just that base neck piece to show through. Okay, new gradient. I'll go ahead and activate this gradient even though it's not the right one. I want this nice subtle, if you look over here, I'm letting a little bit of like an orange. It's basically kind of replicating like this orange sunset or sunrise lighting hitting the deer. So it's actually going to be a nice subtle kind of orange gradient. Going to keep that selected, convert this gradient to an orange to orange, 100% to 0%, and get it flowing in the right direction. Ooh, that's a little too much. And I cannot remember if I did. That looks pretty good. I don't think we need a blending mode. Let me see if I did one or not. Nope, just normal. Okay, we're going to keep it normal. That's looking pretty good. Okay. Then the next step is maybe to start working on the face. So we got the same thing going on. Now, I have done just a little bit of detail additions to, as you can see, the head and the face. So basically what we want is a copy to front of this facial piece divided into 3 pieces, and then the same for the head. Let's start with the head. So I'm going to select this, hit Command C, Command F for copy to front. This time, instead of using a line to divide that in half, I'm going to reactivate my guides. Anytime you want to toggle the viewability of your guides on and off, you hit Command colon semicolon. So the semicolon and colon key is right to the right hand side of your L key on the keyboard. So that toggles that viewability on and off. That's just a nice quick key command. All right, I'm going to use that eraser tool I mentioned before. If I activate that, Shift E, while I have something selected, my copy to front piece of the head, and if I get the edge of this eraser up against this line, hold down Shift and just simply click and drag down, it will perfectly erase a line. Now I need to go ahead and just real quickly erase this side of it, but what that did is it just allowed me to erase half of that. So now I only have to worry about I only have half of it here. And I actually want this exact same kind of subtle orange gradient going on. So I'll go ahead and just inherit that from that piece I already established above. If I want to do it to my main head piece, again on the other side like I did this one, I would want to do the opposite of what I just did on this side, or make a copy of this one is something I could do probably. But I'm not going to worry about that right now. We're just going to do it on one side just for the sake of time. Now this one is a little bit different story. Because I want that divided up kind of nice and evenly, I'm going to go ahead and draw myself a line that I can see. So I'm going to reset my stroke and my fill here to no fill, black stroke, so I can temporarily draw a line segment on just one side, okay? Kind of establish where I'd like to see that get divided. I want to copy this over perfectly over to this side, so let's go ahead and use our reflect tool again like we did way earlier. Double click on reflect. I would like a copy of this please, so I can keep the one. Select it with the selection tool, key command V, hold down shift, drag it over to here. And this we're just going to eyeball a little bit, but if you want to ensure that it's perfectly straddling our center point line, which, again, this is a very symmetrical piece. If you select both of them, this is going to tell you how nice and centered you got it. So I did a pretty good job of eyeballing it there. All right, these are temporary lines simply for dividing up and splitting this shape into 3 parts, a copy of it though. So we're going to hit Command C, Command F for copy to front. Now hold down Shift, select the 2 lines, go over to our Pathfinder, click on divide. We don't see too much going on. Don't be concerned that the eye disappeared. That just for whatever reason it popped up above the eye within the order of the layers. But we just want to pick up again this orange kind of highlighting effect. So the eye is going to come back in anyway. And now I deselect it. And I got my gradient in there. I don't really like how it's flowing quite yet, so I'm going to use my gradient tool, key Command G, and change it up however I want it to flow. Now I just kind of want it to look like the deer is getting just a little bit of, you know, a sun reflecting going on, coming in on the front of his face a little bit from that sun. Okay, got that. Back up, we're almost done. Same thing with the ears. If we want to add a little bit of gradient there, just copy to front. Eye for eyedropper, pick that up. Play with the gradient a little bit. With the gradient tool, key Command G. I want this to be real subtle. I don't want it to be overkill. Antlers, same thing. It's got a few of these have a copy to front gradient. Command C, Command F, copy to front. This one, what can I pick it up from? I wonder if it'll let me pick it up from the background. Whoops, I don't think I got a copy to front. Whoops. Command C, Command F, copy to front. Pick up that light purple gradient from the background. Why is that? Whoop, whoop. Something is going wrong here. What am I doing? Oh, let me look at my gradient. That is really weird. Well, I don't know why that's not quite working right, so I'm just going to make my own. Copy to front. Click on the gradient. There we go. I don't know why. Or you might have to drag them into there. I'm not sure what happened there. Glitches happen sometimes. I want this to be pretty subtle, so I'm going to get a darker purple into there, I think. I don't think I want it to be 100%. Let me get down to my transparency. Oh, I am just a mess. Hold on a second. Where's my transparency? I must have accidentally closed it. Dial down that transparency a little bit. I just want this to be very subtle. I don't want it to be overkill. So there we go. A little bit of like a gradient on the antler so that they have a little bit of pop. So you can kind of pick and choose which pieces you want it to have that. Copy to front. The good thing is once you've established one, as far as this kind of subtle purple gradient, you can just keep borrowing it for the other ones with the eyedropper. Okay, and this is what I'm talking about. I'm getting all this established right now so that I don't have to worry about it by the time I go to reflect things. I just do it once and then I have a perfect instance of it for both antlers. I'm going to go into little details. You'd be surprised that just paying attention to detail, making sure things are lined up perfectly, making sure there isn't, you know, little imperfections. Like I'm zooming in and seeing that I had an imperfection here with his nose. Might take care of that. I might round off this a little bit so it just doesn't look so sharp. Paying attention to little details is important. I've realized now that we do need to get the muzzle taken care of so that he actually has like a mouth. So we need to do a copy to front there. This one will be real easy. We'll go Command C, Command F, copy to front. I think what we'll do is make the bottom mouth light purple, top the darker purple. What I like to do, especially when I know I want something to be a perfect circle, is I will sometimes use this erase tool and just actually use the shape of the eraser itself. And I can kind of pay attention to getting it perfectly centered and then bring it down just a little bit and then simply click once and that just perfectly erased out that shape for me. So it's kind of like mimicking the Pathfinder, but I'm just using this eraser tool, right? So then the top part of his muzzle is just this darker purple right here. So there I got his mouth in. For the eye, I just chose to kind of play around with the details of the eye a little bit. If you're having a hard time selecting the eye, I think it's because this gradient got on top of it. So sometimes it's easier to just go over to the layer, see what's going on, and then manually move things. So I'm going to move the eye to the top so that I can actually grab it. If it's covered by another layer, even though it has a transparency to it and you can see it, it will prevent you from actually selecting it, so you just might have to play with your order over here. I'm just going to sharpen things up a little bit, and really the only detail I want to add to the eye is just like a nice little shiny spot, like there's a little reflective piece in his eye. You might want to make it a perfect circle, so I'm going to hold down Shift and place it wherever I feel looks the best. I'm going to put it right there. Okay. Now that I have his eye, his antlers, and his ears done, I'm going to select all three of those and just go ahead and reflect them all together, and I think that should work for us. I'm a little concerned because I know that the eye and the ear and the antlers are on separate layers, but I think it'll work. So select all these just so we can do it all together. Hit double click again on the reflect. Tell it to be a copy, and good. Yeah, it keeps things on the separate layers for me. Now, while that is all selected, very carefully click on it, hold down Shift, and drag it over until it's nice and even and is the same amount of space, you know, from the edge as the other one. Take a really good close look to make sure things are right. Okay, and then I always like to just step back and see if I'm really happy with things. I might make some adjustments, like I brought down that gradient a little bit, selected on it, hit G, drug it down a little bit. Just make sure I didn't miss anything. Make sure the order of things are correct. At this point, I think we're going to call it good. So you can and you will want to go ahead and probably just delete the sketch out from underneath things. So go ahead and delete that sketch. We don't need it anymore. Oops, don't make a copy of it like I just did. Drag it down to the trash can. And that is it. That is our deer tutorial. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Make sure you hit save throughout working. I didn't really mention that. Something I forget to do sometimes when I'm doing tutorials, so just Command S is a good practice to continually be saving. And I will see you next class.